Okay, so we started off, like I said, we took from here to Chicago, from Chicago to Istanbul, Istanbul down to Tel Aviv, and we spent the first night, to get back to your original question, Tim, we spent our first night kind of between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. We got up the next day and we stayed in the Shafela area, or we started in the Shafela area, the low hills area, and we transitioned down. By the end of the day, when we traveled from the Shafela area down to the Dead Sea, where we spent we spent 3 nights in the Dead Sea area, not in the Dead Sea. In the Dead Sea area, you go from 2,000 feet above sea level to 14,000 feet below sea level in 30 minutes. 1,400, I'm sorry. And that's the lowest point on Earth is the Dead Sea. Claire, would you go out to the car and look in the back seat? I got some papers there too. So before we get started, let's go ahead and seek the Lord's face in prayer. Father God, we thank you for this day and for those that have come out to hear this study, Lord. I know that many of them are either hungry to go to this land themselves, or if not go, everyone is interested, because this is the Bible in 3D. This is seeing these places that we've read about our whole lives, to look at the ground and walk on the ground where these individuals that we read about in the Bible walked, and where these events come to life in our mind's eye. God, I'm grateful that for sending Malia and I there. It's a debt that can never be repaid, and I'm so grateful that for the love they pour out to us daily, on a daily basis, Lord. And God, I lift these up that have come here to hear about this time that we spent over there. And God, I ask that you would be with us in this time of sharing and just looking through these pictures and talking and discussing this time that we had together. In Christ's name I pray, amen. So, I guess one of the other things that would be important to say was that it wasn't just a bunch of Tennesseans that went over there. There was only 9 of us from Tennessee or something like that in a group of 32. It was primarily a group of people from California, and one of the young ladies from California had been there before with Mark Whitehead. Mark Whitehead is the one that led it from the from the English standpoint. He lives in Cornwall. She'd been on a trip with him before. She reached out to him about doing another trip and asking him if he would lead it. And he said, yeah, but can you give me some seats for some folks back home? And she said, yeah, of course. So we got to go with some of those, but we met some people from around here, some really good people from around here as well. A couple from McKenzie, Tennessee, so West Tennessee, and then some others closer by. But all that said, let's just jump in and look at what all we saw and what we did, and let me kind of walk through some of these things. So they're just a little quick to prove to y'all that we did go. There's our tickets with my name on it. Malia has some too. This was, you might think, why in the world does he get that up there? Turkish Airlines, one of the nicest airlines in the world. And they've got this monitor thing there, and they have pretty much movies that are just in the theater or just out of the theater, so you can plug in. You're on the plane for 10 and a half, 11 hours. Coolest thing I liked about it, though, and I've got a video I'll try to show y'all before we finish this, the second or third session. See where it has a little airplane right there? There's a camera on the nose of the plane pointing out and on the nose of the plane pointing down. And you can switch to it and you can watch live the plane. So I was watching it when we took off, when we landed, and there's a time on our way back where I've got a picture of some sheets of ice. We were flying between Greenland and Canada. You're flying over, you can see these big sheets of ice underneath you as you're flying over, which I thought was pretty neat. And there's games and music and all kinds of other stuff. There's an example of the camera right there. There's your pastor's wife. This is when we're leaving Istanbul, and the Jewish, they don't trust TSA enough. The Jews they're making sure that people coming in their country are. That's when we arrived in Ben Gurion Airport, so we're in Tel Aviv at this point. Now, if you notice here, my permit to be there, I couldn't work while I was over there, but my permit's good until September 23rd. September 20th. So, I could go back right now with my permit there and still be legit to be in the country. That was a pretty cool shot from the tarmac when we got off the plane.
That's the one I did.
Yeah, that's the one picture that Molly has in the slide deck, I believe. That was breakfast the first morning. If you're thinking about going and you're wondering what's the food going to be like, what am I going to eat? You're going to eat like a king or a queen when you're over there for breakfast and for dinner. Lunchtime, the way GTI Tours is set up, a lot of these Israel trips, they take you and they go to a restaurant somewhere for lunch every day, which there's a coolness to that because you're going to a local restaurant. They do a picnic at a national park, which is equally as cool in my mind, but you save all that time and you get to visit another site or two because you're not spending time driving into town and driving back. Some of the picnic lunches I don't think were Malia's favorite, and some of the others either, for that matter, but we found a way to soldier through it. And Claire and I are wanting to go in 2025, so we'll have to discuss with her special palette of what we can do for her for lunch. So this is as we're leaving the hotel in Tel Aviv. Again, just a shot from the road. Now at this right here, this is our first stop. This is Yad Hashmanah. Yad Hashmanah. There's a whole lot I could talk about here. This is actually for some European Christians that came back there and settled and built this place up. And what you see in the background there, and I've got some more pictures in a minute, and I think a video I put on there. There's a road, an old Roman road. You see that tree line? You got two sets of evergreens there, right? You see one 3/4 of the way, almost at the top of the ridge line, then you got a group about halfway down the ridge line. Right above that second group, you can make out a little bit, there's a path, it looks like. That's a stone road. That's a Roman road. That's a 1st century Roman road. Okay, Greg, that's pretty cool. No, you don't understand how cool that is. That road is the road between Emmaus and Jerusalem. Now does it show how much cooler that road is? You know what happened on that road now. After Jesus' resurrection, the road that he appeared to the gentleman walking back to Emmaus, that's the road right there. It was actually revealed a few years ago more clearly because they had a big fire on the hillside. And of course, it took care of some of the brush and some of the other stuff where they kind of saw it again. Our Israeli guide said that after all that happened, being an archaeologist and a historian, he was able to go over there and actually walk on that road. So he was able to walk on that original Roman road. The scripture tells us that explicitly it was 7 miles between the two cities. This road is exactly a 7-mile road between Emmaus and Jerusalem. Actually, right there where we were standing at is 5 miles from Jerusalem and 2 miles from Emmaus. This place also, they use to teach, there's a teaching point at every single location. I'm not going to go into all that or we'll be here for 3 hours. But the big teaching point here was the way that the Jews would teach. And you can see this when you understand the Jewish mindset of seeing. So they taught in a way that you see as you're teaching. So they point things out and they point to this and they point to that. That's why parables were used so much. This mind's eye thought process of not just words being delivered, but let's go see what we're talking about is a way that they would teach a lot. So that's why you see some of these landscapes around these synagogues. Again, I'm just going to flip through a couple of these because around the corner from this is an olive press and what would have been the kind of burial site for somebody in that century. This isn't the garden tomb, but it's an example of it. And some other things I'll speak to. This is Dan and Mark. So I can get the... Not that easy to hear. It's like the volume's not going to be good enough for y'all to hear everything he's saying. There's only one of the videos I wanted to make sure y'all heard what he says, so I may have to try to do something when we get to it. But he's pointing out the road right there. My computer's smarter than I am, apparently. So there's Mark, our, never done that to him before. Let's see. I know what's going on. There's Mark, he's a doctor, a nurse practitioner or something, right, Molly, over in Cornwall, like a pediatric. Dan again. This is, I told you there'd be an example of what the tomb would have looked like, what a tomb would have looked like. There's an example of that on one side. There's an olive press. Now Dan explains here, it's pretty funny what he says, but we can't hear it good enough, so it's not worth doing it, I guess. He says, so they would take the olives, they spread them out in this press area, and then either they would push it or an animal would push or pull it or whatever. He looks at everybody and so then now you've got olive oil, right? He's like, well, yeah. And he said, no, you don't have olive oil yet because you've got like a tapenade. You still got the seeds and the shell and the skins and all that stuff is mixed in there. So you don't have olive oil yet. But he did say the cool thing there is the best of the best olive oil, the stuff they would use for the anointing oil and for things like that, is that the olives would seep some oil. So before they have any pressure put on them at all, there's a seeping that would come out of these olives when they're ripe and ready to be pressed. That olive oil is considered to be the best of the best for obvious reasons. They would capture that, and that's what they would use for the top of the line stuff. And then they would take it, that tapenade stuff that's left over, and he's walking over to the other side, and they put it in this other compress type thing. Put it in that basket with palm branches between. So it's kind of like what in my mind, something that I thought of. I mean, you've got these palm branches and you've got these baskets and you've got these pieces of the oil, and you stack that up so that helps filter it all out, kind of like a coffee filter in your coffee pot. And as the pressure is down on it, or like a French press, the pressure is down on it, it keeps all the material stuff up and pushes the liquid out so it seeps through all those filters and it comes out into the olive oil. But even then, they don't get rid of the tapenade stuff and the dirty oil. They would use it for other things. Can y'all think of anything that they may have wanted to use? Think of anything that they may have used that dirty oil, for lack of a better term, for? Soap. We didn't talk about using it as soap. Not in that case. But what's something else we know they use olive oil for all the time? Lamps. One of the places they would have used it for, because it doesn't really matter how pure the oil is there, they just needed it for light. So this is anybody have any idea what that is? That's a threshing floor. So this thing over there, that 4 foot, almost looks like a sheet of plywood size-wise over there on the corner. It's actually, slats of, and there's, you see these little dots, it looks like all over. Those are like pieces of rock and stuff like that all throughout it. So it would flip over on the wheat, and they would pull it around and around, and it helps separate. That's how that would work, and that's what a threshing floor would look like. There's the first group photo. We still didn't know what we were in for yet. That's still just the first location, the first stop, and we hadn't even got to the desert yet. This is kind of a little watchtower area. You go in there. I took a couple more pictures at the very end of that. That's looking towards Emmaus. My daughter thought that was funny. Yeah, I mean, that's just the road behind us. The road to Emmaus behind us. Everybody appreciate that. There was an IKEA. There was no Buc-ee's, John. That's a good question. There was no dollar store either. So Buc-ee's and Dollar General have not infiltrated Israel yet. No Walmart's either. Well, we don't know if he was a carpenter or not. Bible wouldn't tell us that really. He was a tecton, a builder. He may have been a stone worker. That's for later on in our study, but that's.
Good question.
McDonald's, we saw McDonald's, Burger King, KFC when we got into some of the bigger cities. But that was pretty much what we hit. I mean,
Your mic.
what?
Oh.
Is it back on now? Nope. Yeah, closed caption. Okay, it shows that it's on. There we go. What's that?
Shekel.
Yeah, we got some shekels over there. I was going to lay it on the table before we go grab something to eat. One of their kind of curvy, that was, be pretty popular around here. This is us getting to Bet Shemesh. So this area is the area you want to think about whenever you think about the story of Samson. The area I'm about to start showing you pictures from. Many of the events in the books of Kings and Judges are in this area we're about to look at. The hillside where Zor was, where Samson was born, you see it. Then on the other side you see Thimnah. We talked about a lot of things about Samson and how he continually went against his Nazirite vow. Actually, the fact that he lived where he lived at and he had to walk through vineyards and walk through places of things he was not supposed to touch continually, and he kept on doing that. So if you know the story of Samson, you know he continually broke those vows. Samson was actually buried on the hillside that we could see here in just a minute too. Over there on that side. Zor was over there, and Samson buried on that hillside. We still didn't know what we were in for. That hill was nothing. This whole valley you're looking out over be where so many of those events took place that you read about 1st and 2nd Kings and Judges. Mark's kind of teaching on some of the aspects of Samson's life. Really hope y'all can hear what Dan says here. You can't hear it good enough. I'll kind of tell you what he's saying there. So Dan is a Jew, and he's from Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And then the other major university in Israel is Tel Aviv University. And so he starts off here by telling us Tel Aviv University, they're what he calls a minimalist. So they are constantly trying to find proof to say that things in the Bible are just fireside stories. These events didn't really happen. Samson wasn't a real person, all these kind of stuff. They're minimalist. And he said, anytime you hear me say Tel Aviv University, he said, say boo. So every time he said Tel Aviv, we'd say boo. He's of the opposite camp. He's a maximalist. So he's always, as he's looked at history and archaeology, he's always looking at this proves what we read in 1 Kings chapter 2. This proves this, this proves this. He said, He said, and we win every debate. He said they're continually, falling flat on their face because we're finding discoveries every single day. Like he said, you can't put a shovel in the ground anywhere in Israel without overturning biblical history. So everywhere in Israel, every building project they start, all that stuff, they have to stop them almost every time because they uncovered something, they found something, and they have to stop everything and find out what is it, where is it from, that kind of thing. Just more pictures of that area. If you know the story of Samson, you know when he took the 30 foxtails and lit the fields on fire. That's it right there. We were standing right there watching it, looking at it. Right around the corner from this, there's some other ruins there that we didn't really go into any great detail about, but we did get our first chance to see what a cistern looked like. And you read about cisterns in the Bible, and so we're about to see one of those. This is us walking down in the cistern now. There's my bride, excited about going into the cistern.
I needed to approve these photos, dear.
So this is us down in the cistern itself. And you see on the walls, that's plaster. That's over 2,000-year-old plaster that's still on the walls. Dan made a joke that in his apartment, he lives in Tel Aviv, that in his apartment in Tel Aviv, his plaster is 5 years old and it's fallen off the walls. This is, 2,000-year-old plus plaster on the walls.
Is that for water storage?
It's water storage, yeah. I'm sorry, Roy. Yeah, that's what a cistern was, to be the water storage for the area. So, water, of course, they didn't have this opportunity, but water-wise, it isn't the most ideal way to have water. They could fill with mud, they could fill with all this other bunch of stuff too, but of a lack of options, it's one of the best of not very many. It's kind of the best way I can think of saying that. It was best if you could have one where it was spring-fed or, something like that. The battery must be going dead on it. Yeah, that would be the access hole they would have used from the top to get the water out. Battery, I guess, is going dead on this because it keeps turning off on me. If you don't mind, there should be some batteries in the office. And oftentimes, first thing in the morning, Mark would hand out a dozen or so scripture verses and just hand them out, whoever would pass them around or whatever. And at different teaching sites, he would have you read a scripture verse. So you're not just listening, you're a participant in actual study also. And that's what's going on here. That's Rudy, this gentleman right here. If you're reading the blog that I was doing, he's the gentleman you heard me speak about. One time he had kidney stones while we were over there. Actually, we ended up having to carry him to the doctor the morning we were heading out on a trip in Jerusalem. Fortunately, it didn't really hit him hard until we got to Jerusalem, which you would have better medical facilities and stuff than back when we're in the Dead Sea or in Negev around Galilee. I just thought that was funny. No biblical teaching there, just beware of falling down. Y'all that know me know my sense of humor can be a little bit skewed, so that's. So this is Tel Azekah, where we're going to next. So to this point, this first day, we had seen the road to Emmaus. We'd seen already the story of Samson become 3D for us. Tel Azekah is another place where a certain story in the Bible, thank you, John, would become 3D for us. And anytime you see me say or see a city named with the language of Tel, a Tel is like a designator, which means it's a city that's been built upon itself multiple times. Tel Aviv, Tel Azekah, there's a lot of Israeli cities with the word Tel. You've heard of these cities in Israel where you can see like multiple civilizations built on top of each other. Those are Tels. So this is Tel Azekah. Well, on top of Tel Azekah, you look down over the valley of Elah. Does that ring any bells to anybody? Or the Elah Valley? David and Goliath. That's where David slew Goliath, was in the valley of Elah, or the Elah Valley. So that's where we're going to next. The theme there was throw your stone. He kind of talked about when God gives you something to do and gifts you to do something, throw your stone and do it. Little Hebrew history there if anyone wants to read about it. This is
The first night.
no, this is the individual that I told you about, Marty. The guy from California. He decides he wants to run up the tough path. We just let him go. Nobody else followed him. This is kind of up there looking down. There's a video in a minute I'll show you that gives you a better idea of, that's the valley. And actually, right down there where the tree line is, and you see it drop off, the stream bed where David would have picked his stones up is right around the corner and runs right there. And actually, I've got 2 stones over there in a bag that came from that same stream bed. Just another view looking out over the valley. Some new growth and development going on right there. As it pans across, the Philistines would have been camped out on that hillside on the right, the Jewish army on the left. And they came down into the valley, and that's where Goliath had been coming down every day and challenging the Jews, here I am type thing. That's where that happened at. So again, you can see just steadily it's building the feeling in you of we're here at these places where these events took place. Not that you doubted before, but like I said, in my mind's eye, it's in 3D now for me. Seen it, smelt it, touched the ground, all those kind of things. This was kind of our teaching point. Our teaching areas weren't always this shaded, nor this comfortable. Sometimes they weren't. We tried to find those kind of places when we sit down to teach. That's kind of what the modern agriculture looks like. Those are some greenhouses that are in the valley now. Just things I wanted to show to kind of bring the modern, to place it back in the biblical times. That's some of the nicer ones. We saw some that were pretty ragged looking also.
Olive trees, that's good.
I think those were olive trees right there, Marty. Down in this, there in that area, yeah, it probably was. I can't remember for sure, but I think it was. As we get closer to the desert area, though, most of what you'll see agricultural is going to be date palm trees, banana trees, those kind of things. Date palm trees are everywhere down there. And we had a chance to try date honey a few times. And if you've never had date honey, I highly recommend date honey. It is fantastic. There's 2 days or 3 days into the same pair of clothes. 2 days. That's just the second day. Just a sign. It shows Bet Shemesh, Jerusalem. This is in the valley, in the stream bed where David picked his stones up to kill Goliath. This is looking up on that hillside I told you about that Jewish army would have been on. This is from the stream bed looking up on that hillside. Just a bridge that's crossing the road there now. This is the chance we had to go find a couple of stones. The way they do their hay over there is the big, like they do out west, the large rectangular bales. There's a lot of cattle in Israel too. A lot of cattle. So now we are at, this is our picnic, our first picnic lunch. This is at Marisha. It's a national park now, but there's a historical note here. Herod the Great's father was from there, but he was originally an Edomite. If you know the Herod the Great's family line is from Edom. And after the Maccabean revolt, the choice was kind of made for the Edomites: you stay here and you dedicate to us, or you go back. And so they stayed there. That's part of the reason the Jews didn't care much for Herod the Great, is because his lineage was from the Edomites to begin with. So it's historical significance that he's from this area where we had this first picnic at. And the juices, they had what, Emily? They had
Cherry juice.
cherry juice was huge over there. Cherry juice, apple juice, a lot of juices at lunch and at the breakfast and dinner. And all the Cokes that they had over there were real sugar. I mean, it's not any kind of, what is all the things they use now. None of that. It was real sugar, and they tasted different. I mean, it's been so long since you'd had a Coke with real sugar in it. I had one. I was blown away. I couldn't believe how different it tasted. The flag on the left is kind of like the Israeli tourism flag. You see that at a lot of these sites we go to. This is an excavation they were working on. They wouldn't let us get down to it because it's pretty unstable, as you can probably tell. This is at the place we had a picnic at. So this is an example of how I said that you don't go into town to eat lunch. You stay on site somewhere because you miss these kind of places. It's not as pretty of a picture as it might seem like at first, because this was an old cistern also. But then below here you see all these nooks carved out for pigeon roost. And that was you had to be pretty well off to be able to have pigeons. It was a pretty lucrative business to be in. And because they used them for messenger pigeons and for all kinds of other things. But that's what's going on there, is and they're still there. There's still a lot of them there. And of course, all that's hand carved. You can go to the stones and you can see, and like Dan said, you can tell if they were left-handed or right-handed by the angle of the chisel marks, which is pretty neat too. Just some shepherds we saw as we were leaving that place. Some Hebrew graffiti. I knew I was going to throw some little odd pictures in here and there. Let me think about Nashville there for just a quick minute with all those cranes. Beersheba. Now, most of y'all, that name probably says that's familiar to me, but why? There's a couple reasons why it would be familiar to you. At this place where we saw Abraham's well, we learned about city gates. We hear about city gates in the Old Testament and the New Testament quite a bit, city gates, what they look like. I think maybe y'all were different than me. For so many years, I think I just thought in my head of maybe just one arch, and that's the city gate, and they come into the city gate. That's not what a city gate was. We see one of them here at this place. We looked at a tamarisk tree, which is back behind that shade area, and this is a tree that thrives in that area. It has a very high salt content. It provides shades for generations. They live for a long, long time. So again, the tourism department there, I mean, that's one of the largest money makers for the country. So they really go all out to try to provide these shady areas and places like that. But even then, when it's 100 degrees outside, I don't want to pull your leg and make you think it's all sunshine and rainbows. It's hot. Even in the shade, it's hot. But some of the areas are pretty breezy. I mean, that early on, when we were up there looking at the area where Samson was at, it was breezy up at that elevated position. Not a lot of breeze when we got down in the desert, but Masada, there was some breeze up there, and it needed to be there. It's a tamarisk tree. They call Abraham's well, a well that Abraham would have dug. That's part of what a city gate looks like. So, to Mark's left, you would come in and you would see these openings would have been flowing into where the city gate opened up, and you came in on both sides. You would have these like choke points, which had a defensive and an offensive purpose. First of all, it'd be easy to defend because you could just keep throwing people down these hallways to kind of fight off an enemy, or be up on top with archers. But also it was to be welcoming, so you had all these chances to to have these different stages and stations of, water and refreshments and all these other things. They're actually meant to be that way, but they could be switched over to a defensive alignment very, very quickly. And the more prominent a city was, the bigger the city gates would be, the more of these columns you would have. This is overlooking Beersheba. This is actually the first place we heard the Muslim call to prayer at when we were over there too. We were there late in the evening, and it was the evening call to prayer. We were up on top of I think Mother looked at me, she said, "Ooh, is that what I think it is?" I said, "It is." But you can see the spires off in the distance, so you knew, there's Muslims over there everywhere. There's a good picture of the city gates on one side there. This is an outline of what it would have looked like in its heyday. Do what? This is one of those things. Everything I've told jokes with some of y'all. Everything in Israel seems like it's uphill. I think the parents that started the saying of, had to walk uphill both ways to school. I think they must have been Israeli, because everything over there seemed like that. And every time we start walking, after about 2 days, we'd say, "Oh, we're walking downhill." It took about 2 days for somebody to say, "Yeah, but that means we're just going to have to walk back up somewhere." God, just from time to time I do this. I just thought it was cool to pull up Google Maps and kind of drop a pin of where we were at that time. So that's where we were. You also see right there how close we were to the Gaza Strip. This is our trip down. This is that 3,400 feet drop in elevation trip. I've got a video that I meant to add on here and I just didn't. Then maybe I'll show some Sunday morning or something that shows some of the landscape. But here's some pictures at least of what that looked like. This is heading down to the Dead Sea. It's some pretty beautiful landscapes, really. I know it's the desert, but there's some beautiful landscapes in the desert too. There's the Dead Sea. A lot of mining going on out there. Shared that there's, the salinization rate of the Dead Sea is over 30%. It's not all salt. There's all kinds of minerals out there they're mining for. Potash is one of the main ones, which is used in fertilizers and so many things. Dan told us the next day, this is a picture from like our resort window where we stayed at. This was like where you could go down, you get back early enough in the evening, you could go down there to the Dead Sea and spend time right there on the little beach, walk out in there. Of course, I didn't have a change of clothes, so I couldn't go too far off in there. This is on the back side of the hotel, so that's what we're looking at on the back side, and then you got the Dead Sea in front of you. Found a dinosaur while we're over there. This was the next morning. Malia got aggravated with me because I was up so early the next morning. I'm trying to open the window just enough where she doesn't wake her up, but take pictures too. I want to catch the sunrise over the Dead Sea. And those are the Edom Mountains, by the way, right on the other side, the Edomite Mountains. Temperature, it was scheduled to be 100 degrees that day. No, 99 that day, 100 the next day, 101 the next day. So we knew we had something pretty awesome to look forward to temperature-wise.
Is it a dry heat or is it really?
It is a dry heat for the most part. There's a couple of places that there's a little bit of humidity. And then when you're in Jerusalem itself, unless you're on the Temple Mount, if you're anywhere else, you're kind of surrounded by city walls, so you've got that stuffy heat of people and no breeze and that kind of thing. There was a little bit of humidity in parts of Galilee, probably because the Sea of Galilee's right there, but it was just enough in my mind right there. It wasn't too much or too little. It wasn't a stifling humidity like here. In the desert, absolutely a dry heat. That's one of the mining boats out there working. There's some shekels. I've got some over there too. That's the stone from, one of the stones from the riverbed. Breakfast. I don't remember what those green things were. They looked like something you would see on a space movie or something, but they were good. They're really good.
What's the other stuff?
Chocolate.
A lot of pastries. Up there is like a sweet potato, like their version of like a sweet potato or a yam or something. The other thing that's really unique about the way that they prepare their food and serve their food, you'll see well, maybe I didn't put the video up there, but for breakfast they have all the things you would think of for a salad. They have all kinds of breads out at breakfast time. They really love sweets and pastries, but all of it is made from more natural ingredients than what we use over here. Like so they use date honey in almost everything, which is a natural sweetener. It's actually pretty healthy for you. What is the other thing? The carobs. We ate carobs at one place we were at, which is like a thick brown. It's like a pea pod almost. But yeah, there were sweets at every meal, and there was like stuff to make a salad at every meal. But there was no salad dressing. I put hummus on my salad. I put hummus on everything. I love hummus.
They had oil and.
Yeah. Like if you like oil on your salad, yeah. So every morning we tried to start out with a devotional before we would leave, and this was our devotional that first morning waking up in the Dead Sea area. And we'd recite the Shema. This is us driving on out, heading to Masada. Do what? What'd you say? To our death. No. See the cable cars going up. Now this was those first 3 days, despite the stuff we had seen earlier that has so many biblical references to it, Masada really doesn't. But this place impacted me so much. Possibly because of my being a veteran. That's a big part of why this place impacted me so much. This place has such an impactful part to play in the history of Israel. This was built by Herod the Great, who built so many things and palaces. The thought is he probably never even set foot there, but he knew he was so hated it was a place he could get to quick and be relatively safe there because you couldn't get to it easy and you could defend it very well. I'll tell you in a minute some of the things about this place that really impacted me. This is just on our way in. This is what it would have looked like in its heyday, and you see this little V coming off that back corner. This is also, you see how it looks like two almost equal height plateaus there? That's because it is. The Rift Valley is right there. This is one of the most active tectonic places in the world, more active than San Andreas, anything in the United States. Every year there's 3 plates that come together right there. Every year they say it moves an inch west, an inch east, and an inch north. That's pretty significant every year to have an inch of movement. And the Rift Valley is the valley that is the route that would take you from Europe and Asia all the way down to Africa. That same valley would carry you all that way. Said only 200 years ago the last lion was killed in Israel, but it was nothing to see an Asian bear encounter a African lion in this valley somewhere. This land bridge that connected 3 continents. Some of the pottery stuff they found there. Now, most of this they're finding there is stoneware. This is significant because it tells you definitely wasn't anything Herod brought there, because stoneware would only be used for the most pious, the most religious of the religious, because it was non-porous and it wouldn't be defiled. So this is what your Essenes, the most religious of the day, would have used stoneware. There's our trip, our one-way ticket up the mountain. This one's a little bit louder, I guess, because we're in that cable car. Notice that trail that was right below us. I'll bring that up in a second. scared of heights, just don't look out the window. So that little trail that you saw, that's called the Snake Trail. That was one of like only 2 ways to get up there. It's still open, but they usually will not let tourists take it anymore because it's so hot over there. Like the time of the year we were there, several of the younger guys that were from California, they were all, amped up wanting to go do it, and our tour guide said, "You're not doing it. So I'm not letting you do it." But people do it. They take that snake path.
There
So-
was someone coming down it.
There was somebody coming down it, yeah. There's Devin Pickard and Eric Henson. These are walls. It's hard to tell from this picture. These are multiple walls, which would have been storage areas for the olive oil and for the olives and for all their stores there. And stuff would have remained preserved there for a long time, not being cooled or anything, just because of the dry environment that it was all in. You're going to see something in just a second. Okay, here we go. You see that black line right there? We saw it throughout Masada. So what that is in 732, I believe it was, 732 AD, one of the largest earthquakes the earth has ever seen happened in that area. They think it was well over a 9.5. I mean, it's massive. It destroyed stuff all across the Middle East. So a lot of the structures that they have found over the last several centuries, they've kind of had to recreate because of that destruction. That line is the line saying everything below this line was the original foundation. Everything above this line was where they built it back on top of it. So they kept true to that line throughout the buildings that was up there. That earthquake come up in several other teachings too because of how impactful it was to the region. These pictures just do not do justice to what this view looked like. This is looking right off the nose of Masada. These were pools and palaces and stuff that were built into the side of the mountain by slaves by hanging off of ropes, and basically if one of them fell, which they fell all the time, then you just replace them, run another one down the hillside. For a place that Herod probably never went to. Now, this area is the only place in the world where you can still see a true Roman occupation. Can't talk. A camp. That's what the first century camp would have looked like from a distance. Then you see the siege wall too. You'll see a better picture of it in a minute. These are some Greco-Roman columns. That's what it would have looked like in all its glory. That face I showed you a minute ago, the pools, all this stuff was built into the side, the face of this mountain. This is a mikveh. I'm not going to go into all the details of a mikveh because we'll be here too long if I do. Ceremonial bath, a ritual cleansing. So this tells you who actually took up occupation here. Those words that OCCs are really bothering me. Would have been religious, very religious people, the zealots, and that's actually who would go there. They would flee Jerusalem when Rome came down during the revolt in 60. We know about the temple destruction in 70 AD. Most of us do, right? And they came and they destroyed the temple. That's not a one-time event. There was a 4-year revolt going on that led up to that point, and when that revolt started happening, these zealots, they fled to Masada. About 850 zealots fled to Masada. And they held out there, 850 of them, against 3 Roman legions of troops. Guys, that's 30,000 hardened soldiers against 850 zealots, men, women, and children. They held out at this place for 4 years against them. We'll come back to that. Part of the mosaic floor that they've uncovered, bathhouse, spa area type thing they would have had. The mosaics on the wall. The heated columns, so as you heat the water up, these columns, these stones would heat and keep, circulating the heat properly. Another cistern. Now you might think, well, there's a cistern. There's no water around. How did they get water in this place? How did they hold out for 4 years against these Roman legions if there was no water to begin with? This is Dan. This is a model they have set up. You see there's a wet spot there. So once every 5-6 years, they have something over there called a wadi. And a wadi is like a flash flood that's 10 times flash floods we know of here. Where it rains there, and it hadn't rained there in 5, 6, 7 years, and it just comes as a flood off these mountains and down these valleys, and there's nothing to hold it back. There's no vegetation to slow it down. So they come up with an ingenious way to harness that when they would come every 5 to 6 years with these knee walls that would help direct the water to where they needed it to go to fill the cisterns up. And that's what he's demonstrating there. He poured water over the cup, and it showed where the water ran to fill up the cistern. This was the synagogue, where the synagogue area would have been. I hope you can, this is the video I was saying I really hope you can hear, so I hope you can hear this. No, this isn't the one I thought. I put the wrong one on here, but I don't think you would have been able to hear it anyway. So what Dan is, right after this I filmed another video. So as Masada was getting ready to fall, the Romans finally breached the wall. They built a siege ramp, which is what we walked down right beside when we left Masada. A 2,000-year-old siege ramp. It's still there today. The only Roman siege ramp still in the world you can see right now is there in Masada. The wood from 2,000 years ago is still in the middle of it, and the dirt on top of it. So after 4 years, they finally built a siege ramp to get up to breach the walls. The Romans breached the walls late in the evening, but they didn't pour into the city. They decided to wait till the next day and do it. It's kind of their arrogant way anyway, but we'll just wait till tomorrow. Let y'all worry about it all night long. So the 850 zealots, if you read this, the historical account of this, there are some that will say it was a large mass suicide. Dan, our guide, said he doesn't view it as a mass suicide because that goes counter to their whole religion, to take their own life. The leader of the zealots gives a 3-minute speech, and it's recorded, and Dan recites it. And he talks about their devotion to God and their devotion to country and all this kind of thing. It's very, very great. I think I shared it on the Facebook Messenger or something when I got it. I'll try to get it where somebody can hear it again. And then a guy comes in with a jar, and he shatters it on the floor, and they take up the pieces of the jar, and they write family names on each individual piece of the jar. And then they put them in a basket or something, and everybody comes and picks out a piece of this pottery. And whoever's family name you got, it's your responsibility to ceremonially execute that family. Part of the speech is we will not be taken as slaves. We will not let our women be taken as slaves. We will not let our children be taken as slaves. We will not on and on and on and on. And so to Dan's credit, he said, I don't view it as a suicide. I view it as something different than that. And I would agree with him. And they did it in a very as humane as possible way. They did it actually in a Roman way that they would do for their own soldiers, between the 3rd and 4th vertebrae with a sword, straight down between the 3rd and 4th vertebrae and immediate death. That whole thing up there really hit me pretty hard.
There was the last guy standing, though, wasn't there?
There was a last guy standing, yeah. This happened a couple other times too in other places in history. It's the reason that Josephus was still alive to be able to give us his historical account is because the reason we know so much about Masada is Josephus was there. He was in that camp. He wasn't in the city walls. He was on with the Romans because he'd been taken captive. And Josephus, if you know anything about Josephus, he was there at Masada. They have a scribe there. There's a little place in the back where the scribes always handwriting out the scrolls. And there's a lot of people who do their bar mitzvahs there. And so they can actually take a scroll handwritten by a scribe and read their section of scripture from that. And so we all went in there, and Judy, this little lady that was with us, she come in there, and he looks up. I was in there, Malia was in there, she was in there. And he asked her what her name was, I think, and then he asked her what her husband's name was, and she said she wasn't married. And he wrote her name out and wrote a little prayer out in Hebrew on a piece of paper, folded it.
It's just her name and a heart.
Name in her heart, okay.
Not a prayer.
And gave it to her. So I thought that was a pretty awesome thing for her to take back. It was very personal. Now we're about to start to walk down this place. Those are 20th century speakers and lights right there. The ramp's just over to the side. There we are, basically right on top of the ramp. This is a tribute to those that held out for 4 years. That's made right there, halfway down the trail coming off the mountain. Nothing fancy, trying to traditional Jewish. Remember, it was stones and some kind of little. That's kind of their way. There's a view from the bottom looking up the ramp to the Rome. That's a 2,000-year-old ramp. Catapults, wagons, and stuff like that from the Roman era. And that says we're pulling away. We went and rode our camels. Bedouin hospitality. You can tell Molly's cutting her eyes over at me a little bit there.
Why did you have to wear a helmet? Because if you were to fall off, you might hit your head on a rock.
They didn't, yeah. They didn't have many helmets that fit my big noggin though, so I had to wear a big old bicycle helmet. They don't make a lot of jockeys my size, I guess. Does it anything about that surprise you guys? Look at what this dude's got on. I mean, it's nothing to wear long sleeves when you're over there, really, because you can have cool material. Old farmers still do today, wear long sleeves, working in the fields and stuff. This guy's got a jacket on, though. I didn't get that. We thought it would just be a little cruise around the park. I'm sorry?
What riding a camel like?
You don't have a video?
I've got one, but I didn't.
Very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's pretty uncomfortable.
A lot of sweating, I would.
Most of the movement is kind of front to back versus this. I wish they would have told us that day about how coarse the camel hair is, because most of us had shorts on, and you've got this thing that goes underneath the saddle, and then the coarse of the camel hair too. Most of us had some rough edges, some sandpaper-like stuff on the inside of our thighs, and they stand up and they get like this too, lean forward.
If you're not hanging on very tight.
Yeah, you better be hanging on whenever they get up, when they get down.
Yeah. When you're dismounting.
But I mean, Abraham and Isaac, the patriarchal fathers, camels were part of their life.
For those drivers, they look Arab, the dress look that way.
Yeah, they were. This is them wrangling goats. This whole little area is a hospitality area. They wanted you to, wrangle goats and do some things there. There was lunch for the day. That's grilled chicken, kind of like a hoagie bun, and it's pretty good, I thought. Now this is a hospitality tent. They kind of explained to us what hospitality would have looked like in that culture, especially thousands of years ago. Somebody comes in from the road, and you would be hospitable to them. You would make them something to eat. You would give them tea. You would do these things for them. And this guy did some of that stuff for us. And here he is making bread in the traditional manner.
That was coffee. He had his coffee.
At the end, you get coffee, and it's
Pretty stout.
yeah, it'll straighten the hair out. They don't give you much.
I didn't drink it.
They don't give you much.
Impressive.
It was strong.
And that tent was put up just for GTI.
Yeah, they just started doing all this stuff in addition to the camel ride. So this was put up for our tour, for the company that leads our tour groups. I think I've got a picture in a minute. You see that thing beside a mark with the big stick coming out of it? That's actually a coffee grinder, a hand coffee grinder. Roasting the beans right there, the coffee beans. I mean, it's all like done right there. Roast the beans, grind the beans.
Coffee something they had traditionally, or is that just for American purpose?
No, it's a traditional thing, especially when it came to entertaining a guest.
So they have coffee.
We didn't see it anywhere, but some of it also was trade because of where they're located at and coming up out of Egypt and Ethiopia and places like that. This is Tel Arad. So again, it's another Tel, so it's another civilization built on top of itself. This one goes back to the Canaanite times. The lower Arad is the remnants of a Canaanite village, which would have been the king of Arad there. Now this place is significant for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of cultural things to find there, but this is the place where the Jews would have first came in contact with Canaanites. It would have been right here in this area, which is extremely significant for a lot of reasons. One of them being something you don't think about is the domestication of the Jewish people. This is where they have learned how a four-walled home would have looked like. They never, they were nomadic people. Now, most everything else they got from Canaanites was bad, but that was a good thing for them. It's teaching about kind of the patriarchal system right here. The patriarchal system is kind of thought of as a negative light in our culture today, but it's the right and proper system that God put in place of a patriarchal system. And he's kind of teaching on that right here. And the father of the house, and he's to provide. He's to go get for the others. I noticed when I put this picture up there, Dan's because trying to get cell phone coverage, I think. See him with his phone up there? So this is lower Arad where we were at. This upper Arad up there. Now this place right here, we didn't stand right here very long. This is a pretty evil place, actually. Sacrificial bones would have been found in these areas right here, in these pits, and oftentimes they've been like babies' bones, children's bones, those kind of things found in an area like this. Right behind Mark right there is where the altar would have been, where they would have sacrificed babies, children, that kind of thing. They found those kind of bones there, so they know that was happening there.
This was Jews by Jews during some of
This would have been during the Canaanite time. The Canaanites, yeah. Yeah.
Again, later.
It did, yeah. But this also is a good time to bring a point up that Dan talked about. When they uncover these cities and they're not quite sure what city it is, and they're trying to piece together where these cities are. When they uncover one they haven't found before, one of the first things they look for is they look for the bones. What kind of bones are they looking for? They're looking for pig bones. If they find pig bones, they're pretty confident it was not a Jewish city. That's one of the first things they look for is pig bones. Or bones of anything, but pig bones is what jumps out to them. They're genius people, though. The Jews are, I mean, look at the agriculture they've got going on right there in this area. That's a miraculous feat. This would have been the upper Arad area. This would have been where the Jewish establishments would have been up here. Now, what's so significant about this place that we spent time talking about, was it Josiah or Jehoiakim? There was actually a temple built there. Now that's, if you know Jewish culture, that's wrong. That's wrong, wrong, wrong. There's only one place the temple's to be at. And it wasn't facing the right way either. But the thing was that Josiah, I think it was Josiah, that declared all temples built everywhere else are to be destroyed. Any found anywhere are to be destroyed except for the temple in Jerusalem. They were all destroyed except for this one. This one was covered in with dirt and built on top of, but it has been uncovered now. And so now you got a remnants of seeing that temple. You can't see much, I know, because you've got layers, the destruction in 732 and all that kind of stuff. See some camels down there too.
These places appear to be very isolated. Is there not modern civilization near some of these?
There is, yeah. They just chose not to carry us to a lot of them early on. But yeah, there is some. There's not, I mean, in these desert areas though, there's not as much. Most of the people moved up into either the Galilean area or further north or to the coastlands. Because the time of the Israelites, a lot of that coastland was actually being occupied by others to begin with. But that coastland is more fertile. They moved to the more fertile areas. I mean, it only makes sense, really. Plus, whenever they lost all tradition of what tribe they're from and where their tribal lands were, that's an easy excuse to go wherever you want to at that point, too. You know, when they were in their tribes, they were supposed to be in these certain parts of the country. We were leaving there to go back to the hotel, and there was a guy out there, a herder, a shepherd out there herding his animals up, and so we stopped and had another teaching point there and read Psalm 23 and some of these things, and we all kind of got out. And the difference was they had a water buffalo over there that you pull behind, especially for us military folks, so they were able to go over and get their water pretty easy. See, Dead Sea evening, my bride in the water. My bride in the water again. And again. Again, just one of my sense of humor things. It's hot. McDonald's cup, yeah. Yeah. That's dinner that night.
She said, what is it? That's
Yeah.
fish in the bowl.
Yeah, that's fish and chips up there. It's tilapia done as fish and chips as we think about. Chips, of course, is fries everywhere in the world except in the United States. Then bread with my hummus on it up there. And then that's beef. There was like a prime rib type roast beef or a prime rib or a roast beef carving at just about every sausages. Of course, we know they're not going to be sausages like we know of, but it was like a lamb sausage, a little bit of spiciness. Yeah, sign me up for that and keep shipping it to me because that stuff was good. That rice is kind of like a Mexican rice, but it's not. I don't know how to explain it. It's a really good rice to have. There's potatoes at every meal, and then those little green bug-looking things that I like so much on my plate again too. That's my luggage finally arrived. You can tell from the paperwork it looks like it traveled more than we did. This was our last morning there. I joked that looks like the Crown Royal Hotel. Heading out knowing that night, so Tim asked about if we stayed in different hotels, so you would know the night before, hey, get your stuff packed, because whenever we leave the next morning, have your bags down here, we'll load the bus up, we'll carry our bags with us all day. End of the day, we're moving to our next hotel. These are just random shots. Now this is in Getty. And Getty's another very impactful place too. In Getty's this oasis in the desert. You can actually see it in the distance from Masada, this green area in the middle of nothing but brown. So we go there. And even here still, it's just like this valley between the mountains of this greenery. Everything else is brown all the way around it. If you can see them or not, those ibex, mountain goat type things over there, they're kind of like a cross between a mountain goat and a small deer. They're not really like a traditional goat. You can see them moving there.
Don't they only come down in the morning?
Yeah, they come down in the cool of the day to drink, and then they go back into their caves. The funny thing was, Dan was just talking about all the different species of animals and plants and everything there, and somebody says, "Oh my gosh, look right there!" And on cue goes, "Oh yeah, on cue, here they are." And now there was a possibility he may have known they may have been coming down that time, but
Those are
go ahead.
the branches that was most likely used for the crown of thorns. From that type of tree.
It's even called that now, the Christ thorn jujube, from that kind of tree. It has these big 2-inch long spikes. This is us kind of getting ready to walk up into the area. See the first waterfall there. There's like 7 cascading waterfalls as you go up through the area. And people wanting to get in the water right there, and he's like, "No, those California people, they're a little impulsive. If you didn't, they're ready to get in the water." He's like, "No, hold on, there's a better one. There's a better one." Of course, we get up to the better one, and it was closed. We couldn't get in it there, so we ended up coming back down to that one. I thought it was still good for them to have be tamped down a little bit. There's a whole story behind this. This is the seat. I've got one right here. This, you see the traditional thing that the more pious Jews and the rabbis and stuff wear these tassels hanging from the edges of their garments. And the blue is supposed to speak of royalty. There's only one stream of blue, royalty. And the teaching point that we're going to get to at the top of the hill here, he gave these to us the day before, I think, Malia? I think it was the day before. Some of the people had them on their backpacks. I had mine with me, but not on my backpack itself. And so Mark challenged us. He said, for the Jew, this is supposed to represent, are you loving the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind? Are you dedicated to Him as you should be? Are you, these kind of things? He said, anybody feel like they have been doing that appropriately, and he kind of, he poured it out. He said, I haven't, and he cut his. And so I got mine out and I held it out. Several of us got ours out, so that's mine laying on the ground. Cut them. And so Malia didn't have hers with her, so she didn't get hers cut. But there's more to that story in just a minute. But what we did teach about here is living waters. This was so impactful to me, the baptisms last week we did in the creek, as impactful as they were anyway, because we talked about living water so much and how different it is. Living water is that water that's moving water versus stagnant water, and how there's life in moving water. And that's a common theme for the Jews, especially considering the environment they lived in. But that baptisms in the creek was even more impactful to me because of that. But it was also taught about for them in this area, you come across living water, you take advantage of it. You wet the rag that goes around your head. You wet the hat that we had on. You wet that little cooling rag that you see a lot of us wear that you put around your neck. You take advantage of water when you come to living water. And of course, we parlayed that into talking about Christ as well, but it's a concept, especially consider where we've been at for the past 2.5 days. Then we go up and we start up hiking again. Kind of a common theme for us. Let's go hiking. It's kind of a view back to the Dead Sea. See, so it's not like a huge lush area, but there's these spots of greenery down through this valley where the water's at. And you go through this little tunnel, grass tunnel type thing.
Very slippery.
Yeah, it was very slippery. This was actually our anniversary too. This day was. This is the one he thought we could all get in. But you see the fence up there. Now, I'm going to point this out because this connects back to the seat and connects back to a story in the Bible you're very, very familiar with. What do you see there? I think you can make them out, especially over there on the right-hand side. Stalactites hanging down, right? Stalactites do not form in open air like that. Stalactites only form in a cave or cave-like environment. The teaching there, the common thought there is that was a large cave at least 3,000 years ago. If you read, I should have wrote the scripture verse down. If you read the account where David is hiding from Saul, Saul goes to use the bathroom, relieve himself in a cave. David is in this cave. Where did he go looking for David at? It was in the valley of the wild. The valley of the wild goats, right, or the place of the wild goats. That's what En-Gedi is, the place of the wild goats. The thought is this was the cave. It's a very educated thought. Can't 100% nail it down, but the way the water comes down in this cave would have collapsed over 3,000 years. This is the place where Saul, they think, would have came in, and David comes up behind him, cuts the corner of his robe right here. That brings us back to the seat again. You understanding the significance of that, understanding why he would cut the corner of his robe out, because Saul was not doing what he was supposed to do as king of Israel and being true to God. So that's what he cut off. You don't get all that unless you see it or somebody tells you about it, but that's pretty important and pretty impactful right there.
Okay.
You wanted that picture. So we're coming back down, and now he's like, okay, now you can get in the water because I thought you could get in it up there, but you can't, so here we are. That's Mark. I think that was Eric. Eric Henson. I hope y'all can hear this. No. But wait, what's she going to try again? Take a photo. She got a little wet right there.
That's how it's done. Right?
Yeah, I wasn't afraid to get in it. That's me. Yeah, but it felt really good. This is some of those date palms I was talking about, Marty. You asked earlier, those date palm trees. No, not yet. That's still Dead Sea area. This is our trip to Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. This again would have been where the Essenes would have been at. Now, I've always thought of the Essenes, I was kind of told this by others, that they were kind of the hippies. You have the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and you have the Essenes, which were kind of the hippies because they lived out in the desert by themselves. Yes and no. The Essenes were more committed to following God's word than the other two by far. Their problem was they separated themselves totally from society versus being part of the society and being impactful in how they were trying to be to God's word. There's a thought, a possibility, a strong possibility even, that John the Baptist would have went and stayed with them for a while before his ministry started. A lot of the quotes that are found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's not all Bible verses. A lot of it is instructions on how they were to live their life and their ceremonial activities and things like that. Some of the sayings that they used, some of the things they said were almost word for word the things that John the Baptist said. There's also a thing they found in the midst of these Dead Sea Scrolls that talks about this man they had heard about being beheaded that was John. Is this the John that stayed with us? Very strong, and we know how devout John the Baptist was. It's a strong possibility when you connect several dots that he could have very well went and stayed with them, spent time with them. Again, a way that they used kind of an aqueduct system to get the water channeled to where they needed it at. A mikveh. That's cave number 5 right there. Cave number 1 is about a mile away, and that was the first one. But cave number 5 is where like 85% of the material that we have now from the Dead Sea Scrolls was found in that cave right there. I got to throw those selfies in so you know I'm not just stealing these pictures from somebody else. That was the first menorah I saw when we were over there, which seemed kind of odd to me that it took that long to see one somewhere. This is when we were at the park having lunch. Actually, in this park, they had a little swimming pool area for kids, and it was like spring-fed, like water rolled in, and they built this circular pool-like area that was not very deep, about 1.5 to 2 feet deep, kind of like a kiddie pool like they used to have when they used to have city pools. And then it kind of had a little runoff on the backside of it. So the swimming pool was continuously getting new water running through it. This is the last thing I'll show y'all, I believe, before, and this went longer than what I thought it would be anyway, but this is the baptism site in the Jordan River. That was our last stop on our way to Galilee that day. Something I like a whole lot about Dan, our Israeli guide, and Mark too, but Dan made a comment that he said he hears these guides all the time on these trips. This is absolutely where this happened on this place. And he said, I'm not going to tell you that unless I know that this is where X happened at. He said, because I wasn't there. He said, there's too many of them that lead people astray. He said, we're going to go to 3 or 4 places where you're going to see all kinds of people getting baptized because their guides tell them this is where Jesus was baptized at. There actually wasn't a lot of people at this place. There was room for a lot of parking. There's all these old churches all around it. There wasn't many people there.
Well, there was a big group of Catholics when we got there, and then they left.
They were leaving, yeah. That's a Russian Orthodox church. I say all that to say this. When we got there, Dan said, and he asked, we have these maps he gave all of us. I meant to bring a copy of one of them too. And he said he is 99.999% confident that we were standing within 100 to 200 yards of where Jesus was baptized at. He said he felt that confident about it. And then he lays out the why. Well, let me get through these pictures of us going down into the water first. See how wide it is? I mean, about as wide as the Piney, maybe. That was much wider in Jesus' time, but it's not very wide anymore. The flags on the other side, those are Jordanian flags. So that's Jordan, right on the other side of the River Jordan. Now, they're friendly with Israel right now. They haven't been for a long, long time, but they are right now. So to kind of get into why Dan says he feels as close as he can in confidence that this is where Jesus was baptized, if you go straight across the river, there's a straight line to a church, and you'll see a picture of a steeple of it in just a minute. It's a church that dates all the way back to the 2nd century. That church, pilgrims would come down from Europe and from everywhere else to that church, and from there they would begin the pilgrimage back to see these historical Christianity sites. They taught then that this is where Jesus was baptized. So the closer you can get back on the timeline of when an event happened and people saying this is where it happened at, the better off you are on being accurate, right? I mean, that just makes sense. There was a ferry, they found an old map underneath the floor of the church, an old mosaic map that dates back to around the 2nd century. On that mosaic map, it has pictures of showing a ferry crossing right there. That ferry crossing would have more than likely been the place where John the Baptist was doing his baptisms, where people were coming over back and forth in this area. And as soon as you nailed down that that's where John the Baptist was, you nailed down that that's where Jesus would have been baptized at. In addition, the Pilgrim's Road showed you going from that church in Jordan straight across there, straight to Jericho, straight to Jerusalem, taking the easiest path possible to get to Jerusalem from Jericho. It only makes sense logically in a culture and environment where you walked everywhere. The path of least resistance went from that church to this baptism site to Jericho to Jerusalem. That's why Dan said he was nearly 100% sure that this is where now 100, 200 yard difference, but in eye shot of where he would have been baptized at.
Before you slipped in.
That was before I slipped in. I went to get up and that's the church on the other side of the river. You can see on my leg there that I had slipped in. Steps were slippery.
Yes. Yeah,
Devin baptizing Eric. There were 3 people that got baptized when we were there. I wasn't against it, but I was just leaning on the Lord that if He led me to do it, then I would. Otherwise, I wasn't going to do it just for the novelty of it, if that makes sense. I mean, it's not wide at all right there. 15, 20 feet.
Does it stay that muddy?
My understanding was that it does. Now, I thought this little place, they didn't say anything about this. I walked over and saw it when I was walking to the bathroom as we were leaving. Little chapel-like area overlooking that, and you see the Israeli flag in the background. I thought that was a pretty neat little area right there. I took this picture specifically for Miss Nan, so y'all tell her I found this picture. In Korean, Mark 1, 9 through 11 is on the wall there. In English, Arabic. On the other side of those trees is where Jericho would have been. It's under Palestinian control right now, so we couldn't go over there, but Dan said there's nothing to go over there and see anyway, really. Nothing we're seeing. They have recently uncovered a lot of proof of walls that fell down, though. You may have seen that in the news recently. This is a stop, unscheduled stop. Mark was pretty good at giving us unscheduled stops. They're known on tour guide. This is the spot the story of the Good Samaritan would have been talked about. This is what the landscape would have looked like of the area where the Good Samaritan was to take place at. I've shared with a couple of y'all, we think in our mind of this 2-lane road and guys like, I don't see you over there, I'm going to walk right way over here. No, it would have been like a cattle path. So this man that was laying there dying, that these religious people walked by first before the Samaritan came by, they would have had to literally step over him. So it's a lot more impactful than just walking around him. You can't ignore that there's a person laying there Can't even act like you're ignoring them if you're stepping over them. And Dan loved it whenever Mark had a place he wanted to stop at that was off. He goes, "Oh yeah, we'll go." It's a pretty rugged landscape right there.
There was children sitting up there trying for us to buy.
As soon as you get off the bus.
Yeah, they were, once they give me your hat, give me your hat. They wanted my hat. But Dan told us what to do before we got off the bus.
Those little Bedouin children, as soon as you get off, when we got into Jerusalem, there
Said,
was,
don't take your backpacks, don't take anything with you,
yeah,
because they're sick.
to try to get stuff out of your bag, whatever. It just shows you kind of the vastness of that landscape. There's that, I got it out of order, but there's that mosaic map I was telling you about from the church floor from the 2nd century in the Jordanian church. This was part on Jerusalem itself. The Damascus Gate, Byzantine, Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So this is part of that map from the 2nd century that's zeroed in on Jerusalem itself, in the temple area. This is when we went through security. We've been in the West Bank and didn't know it. They didn't tell us we were in the West Bank. We're getting ready to go to a checkpoint, and Dan said, "Hey, everybody, we're about to go through a checkpoint up here, security checkpoint." He said, "There's probably going to be some guys get on here with machine guns." He said, "Don't worry about it, though. They're the good guys." He said, "But if any of y'all got your passports, you can get them out for us." And so basically, they don't care who goes into the West Bank, but they want to be very aware of who's coming from the West Bank into Israel itself. Make sure no terrorist has jumped on the bus or gotten himself in the cargo hold or something like that. Those guys were very friendly, though, and young guys. They did have their machine guns with them. They used Dan's language. There, everybody's getting their passports out. Very friendly guys. That is our view from our place at the Sea of Galilee, where we arrived that evening. And again, dinner. Chicken and a little bit of a salad there. I don't remember what all that was. That evening we gathered together and sang some songs of worship together there with a young man that was a very good singer. He actually could play the guitar, played the piano. He was a very talented young man. So we did some worship music together there. Breakfast. That's right, I left this on here just to show you. Those are the breads for breakfast. Fruits, you're not going to go hungry over there. There was another picture I should have showed, it just hit me. I made that comment about John the Baptist possibly have spent time with the Essenes. What kind of triggered that thought was there's an area going on the Dead Sea where you can look over, and I can't remember the name of the area, but that's where Herod had, on the Jordanian side, Herod had a place there, and that's where John the Baptist was beheaded. It was on the other side of the Dead Sea. You can see it at one spot, we kind of pointed out. So, any questions that weren't asked as we went through?